the last time I talked about Mew2King was when I talked about his legacy. Gave him praise. Best multi-game Smash player. The only person that's probably on his level in terms of the aggregate results of all Smash games is Zero. Phenomenal player. I do, he is the target of a lot of criticism from me, and it's not to say that I think he's a very amazing player. So I think a lot of people, when I say like one aspect of his game is poor or bad, what I mean when I say that is that it's poor relative to like the best of the best, like the top five, like the Mango, Armada, Leffen tier. So whenever I say something is bad about Mew2King's game, I think a lot of people run with it and say like, oh, like, and they run with it and turn it into this like meme like thing where it's like, oh, like Mew2King is really bad now, or he's really not improving anymore, or he's getting worse. And for a Mew2King standard, all that really means is he's dropped from arguably top 3 a year ago to now he's probably 6. I think a lot of people, when they hear me say, oh, he's dropping, they think that he's dropping from like top 5, top 6 to like top 15, which is a really big drop off considering the skill gap that we had a year ago between the top 6 players and everybody else. So when I say that Mew2King is slipping a little bit, it means relative to like the top 5. I don't really mean to say that he is slipping to the point where it's like, oh, is he 10th? Is he 11th? Is he 12th? No, it's the questions I have are, is he 5th? Is he 6th? Is he 7th? He's clearly not 3rd. Mew2King is a really interesting player to talk about, especially when I've really been looking at his results over the past 6 months, just investigating how I should rate Mew2King. I looked at a lot of his results, and it's pretty safe to say that he is a gatekeeper to the Big Five. And what I mean is, if you look at his splits, so let's look at this, like the people like 7 to 10 range, Plup, Axe, Westballs. Mew2King hasn't really lost a set, if ever. I need to double check that. Mew2King has a dominant record over Westballs. He's 2-0 against Plup, although that's a really small sample size. And although Axe, did win some sets back in like January, February, or March, Mew2King has pretty much had the upper hand on Axe in like the last like 5, 6, 7 sets. So Super Smash Con dominating Axe even with a 4 stock in that match. So clearly, when we look at tiers, I think a lot of us will agree Westballs, Axe, Plup are in that tier just below the Big 6. And Mew2King, has clearly demonstrated that, like, if you are below a certain threshold, you're going to have a really hard time beating him. And the reason why is that he's still, a peak Punisher. And if you can't out-punish him, you will lose. Or if you don't know how to deal with his neutral game, you will just straight up lose. You will get gimped, you will get comboed, you will lose. And that's what we've seen with the tier below. But when we look at Mew2King's stats, against people better than him, he's aggregately 1-9 against the other members of the Big Five. And I believe he started off 1-0, beating Leffen, and then dropped 9 sets in a row over the past 7 to 8 months against the Big Six. So clearly, if we're to argue tiers, I think that should be condemning enough that Mew2King does not belong with the other 5, with PP, Hungrybox, Armada, Mango, and Leffen. Just by, if you look at the round robin between them, to go 1-9 and have a 10% win rate is pretty self-evident that Mew2King does not belong in that tier. But on the flip side, he does belong on a tier better than the other people, so he may just be in his own tier. So it's going to be interesting for Mew2King, coming up. He's, complained of hand injuries. If you look at his interview with Mango at Super Smash Con, clearly it's affecting him. It's affecting his gameplay. His punish game isn't as crisp because he's not able to practice as much. So you see him drop things that, honestly, he wouldn't have dropped even 4 years ago. But it's kind of interesting because, there are some people that have given Mew2King a scare. SFAT has taken him to Game 5 twice before losing. And a lot of these other players have taken games off of him. Wobbles has also taken a set. He has a weakness towards Ice Climbers. So it's going to be interesting to see what Mew2King does ahead. But before I get there, I want to kind of explain where the gap is separating between him and the big five, and where he's still dominant, but where aspects of the game are deteriorating. And if you remember a Tafo talk I did earlier this year, I really talked about how 2014 and 2015 we're seeing a really huge uptick and everybody making sure that they can maximize damage. So this is something you'll see, especially with players like Armada and Leffen and Hungrybox, is that they'll take a hit and run with it. So Mew2King's specialty, his secret sauce, if you will, was the ability that he can touch death deal. And against Foxes, Falcos, against Leffen especially, Mew2King would just outpunish him. Leffen would win a lot of neutral games, and then Leffen would get grabbed, and then Leffen would fall behind. And that was the story of 2014, where Leffen would start out decently, and then he would get gimped, or he would get killed and fall behind. Now with 2015 rolling around, Leffen is punishing just as hard as Mew2King, and given that Leffen is better at the neutral game than Mew2King, Mew2King's neutral game, has some little kinks to it. Especially, if you really watch his Marth and Sheik, he really fishes for a lot of grabs, and the better players that are tier above him are really aware of what Mew2King is wanting, and so they're not giving him what Mew2King wants. And once in a while, the better player, the Leffens or the Mangoes will flub, and Mew2King gets a grab, and he may get a kill, but Leffen will also do a lot of damage off of a grab of his own or an opening of his own. So against the top level spacies, Mew2King has really lost his edge. Where even FD is not a guarantee anymore against the Leffens, the Armadas, the Mangoes, the PPs. So he really lost a really big, strong power counter pick in that against the best players, because other players are just punishing just as hard. Even if you look at players like SFAT, they punish Mew2King really hard as well. So Mew2King has lost that aspect of the game. I wouldn't say lost, but relatively speaking, other players have caught up to him in the punish game, and because they have a better neutral game, they're straight up winning. And Mew2King also tends to not shine against top tier characters that cannot be killed instantly. So this is a pattern that we've seen with, Wobbles, Nintendude, Armada's Peach, Marth Ditto when he does Marth Dittos. And when he plays against Hungrybox's Puff, the commonality in all these matchups is you can't touch a death any of them, especially if their opponent has good DI. So Mew2King is trained to play extended neutral games where his opponents are naturally going to be adapting faster than Mew2King is. It's not to say Mew2King doesn't adapt. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions we get from the documentary, is that he has the moniker of being a robot. And part of that is because, his base game plan and his base fundamentals and his base way of exploiting matchups with character advantages are so good that he hasn't needed to adapt for years. But even if you watch matches where he plays Hugs, the first match tends to be close for Hugs, and then usually on game 2, Mew2King usually runs away with it. And that's because he's adapting and making adjustments. But so he's still a remarkable adapter. I would say he's top 20, in adapting. Because he's so aware of situations. It's just he doesn't adapt as fast as other top level players. So you'll see him take early leads against Armada. You'll see him take early leads against Hungrybox. And then you'll see slowly the shift begins to turn as his opponents adapt faster than him. So what does Mew2King really need to do, in my opinion? It's very clear that, if he's given the practice and given the experience that he can learn. And we see this with Axe, where he used to play Axe all the time, and there was a stretch of time where he forgot the Pikachu matchup, didn't know what to do, would get dominated even as Sheik in a matchup that's really favorable for Sheik. But, he played Axe a lot, got familiar with the matchup, and look at where he is now. So there is hope in all this, is that you put him in an environment where he can continue to learn, continue to practice. I think he's more than capable of learning what he needs to do for 2015. I think, if you played a player like Mango or Leffen or Armada, for long stretches of time, it's going to, disseminate to him that the necessary adaptations that he needs to do to stay relevant, not just with people that are ranked lower than 6, but for competing at that level. And that's actually what kept Mew2King relevant last year, was that every day he used to play with Armada at Sky's house and play with Zero for 10 hours a day. And because, he was able to play with Armada and Zero so much, it kicked a lot of his bad habits, and he actually played really well, to the point where he took he beat PP at MLG. He took Armada to Game 5. So clearly, if he's able to practice with top level talent, I really do think that he can make the adjustments he needs to maybe not be the best, but to at least, get third or second or fourth at some of these nationals. I think people forget that Mew2King got second place at Big House 4. And I think the main thing is Mew2King has a lot of second places, and maybe he's like kind of like the Armada of 2014, where he had a lot of second and third places. He got second at Apex 2014, got second at Big House, got, I believe, third at MLG. These aren't bad results. These are actually really good. It's just that we tend to forget because we haven't seen him really play lately. Didn't attend EVO or CEO, but I really do believe, I'll reemphasize that if he manages to get talent to play with, and not just Axe, but he gets a Leffen or a Mango and he's able to play regularly with them, I'm really confident that he can, as long as his hands aren't injured and there's something not preventing him from practicing, I really think he can do it. I really do. But because he has to play with Ty, no offense to him, and play against these like Foxes, these second tier, top 50, top 75 level players, he's not getting the experience he needs because he can always resort to his gimmicky neutral game, where it's like, okay, like I'm just gonna mix my grab timing, and if I get a grab, then I'm gonna win. He can just exploit Ty using these neutral game gimmicks. He can beat Meds with these neutral game gimmicks, and he doesn't really have to think. He could play, subpar and probably 2 to 3 stock them every game. And so I don't really think that's beneficial for Mew2King. And so overall, really do hope. I do have a lot of high hopes for Mew2King, and it's kind of tragic that his career may be ending if he doesn't get his hand and wrist injuries resolved. But TLDR, I really do believe that, if he gets the right practice, if he somehow can miraculously, practice with good players all the time, I really do think that he is more than capable of staying relevant.